Hello and welcome to the Penalty Box Perspective podcast, a new podcast which will summarise the NHL weekly. My name is Nathaniel and I'm joined once again by my good friend Matt. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very good, mate. Yeah, very happy to be here. Very happy to get started and see where we can take the podcast. And yeah, how's everything your end? All good?
Yeah, all very good, very good. I'm definitely excited. Lots to go through today to let people know what we're doing and what we're about. But yeah, feeling good. So I guess we'll start with what this podcast is going to be. And I touched on it before, but it's going to be a weekly podcast covering the NHL week by week, a bit on every team, every episode, just summarising how we're doing week by week. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the main goal of the podcast, certainly from the perspective of two British fans of the NHL, is we understood as fans that it can be quite difficult for fans in the UK to fully keep track and everything of what's going on in the NHL. I think due to the timings when the matches are on, with an 82 game regular season, I think it can sometimes be quite difficult, to keep a full grasp of what's happening around the league. And that's what we're looking to try and do here is, give everyone a weekly rundown of what's been happening in terms of, results and scorers, any big stories, contracts, injuries, trades, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think we're not insiders, we're not coaches, players. We are fans of the NHL and just hoping to convey our fandom across to other people who can hopefully hop on and join the ride with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the reason why I initially struggled to get into hockey is because of the amount of games and oftentimes in the early hours of the morning for those in the UK. So it can be quite a tricky sport to get into in the UK. But I absolutely love it. The sport itself, it's absolutely great. And I just think what I was missing throughout the early years is being a fan of the NHL is having that podcast which summarises everything in the sport in a succinct way so that I could help keep up with what's going on. So I guess I'll go touch a bit on about sort of me and obviously my background and the fandom of it. I started about 10 years ago following the sport. Initially as a fan of the Calgary Flames, but I couldn't sort of grasp and keep up with what was going on, and I sort of dropped off a little bit. And then more recently, sort of 3 to 4 years ago, I've got big into it, watching essentially Minnesota Wild week in, week out. Caught probably 75% of their games last year. Obviously watching other games as well in between. And I thought the podcast would be the next step as to pushing my interest and letting other people know about how great the sport is.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm very much the same. I got into the NHL about 10 years ago through one of my closest friends. We got into it through the NHL video game series. He's a massive Pittsburgh Penguins fan. I didn't know anything about the sport at the time, but I was really interested in playing the game and watching it and just trying to figure out how it all worked. So we kind of had a rule between us that I would try and play through with every team, and whichever team I first beat his Pittsburgh side with, that would be the team that I would support. And I eventually, fortunately at the time, managed to land on a very stacked Chicago Blackhawks team, with a whole multitude of future Hall of Famer players, and that was where I got my first win. So I made that decision that I was going to follow Chicago at that point. I also have some family in the Illinois area, so it kind of made sense for me in that regards as well. Hasn't necessarily been smooth sailing ever since then, but yeah, so I just got into it that way and started off initially just watching a lot of the highlights and just trying to read what I could. But I would say definitely over the last sort of 3 to 4 years, I've become really, really immersed into the sport itself and reading all the ins and outs and, prospects and trades and, and like the actual analytics side of it all, which I just find, incredibly fascinating. I think that, hockey players represent some of the most athletic people in the sporting world. I think the combination of speed and strength and skill, and not to mention they're doing it all on ice, which adds that extra layer of difficulty. So just moving forward, I think we'll look at giving a rundown at sort of how the week to week's going to look for us.
Yeah. So there'll be 2 podcasts released weekly. The first one will be the main podcast, which will cover through like the big news and the summary of each team's weekly results and stories, providing context on the entirety of the league and essentially your go-to episodes to keep yourself up to date with the goings on in the league. And then there'll be a supplementary podcast which will aim to offer a more insightful experience, deep diving into a specific subject or area around the NHL. That will change week by week depending on what's interesting at the time. May dip into some of the history of the league and things like that. So I think there'll be something for everyone. Obviously it's difficult to cover every single team in great detail every episode, but I think that's where the second episode will come in, maybe covering everything in a bit more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're going to start today, first episode, obviously kind of following this introduction of just letting listeners know a bit more about us and who we are and why we are into the sport. We're going to do a little bit of a look back over the season just gone, so the 24-25 season, and just have a little bit of a reflection on what happened and going through each team and who played well, who maybe didn't play well, and obviously it was another big season, topped off with a second consecutive Stanley Cup for the Florida Panthers. So but just touching on what you said with the 30-minute sort of additional podcast each week, there really is going to be really open in terms of what we discuss. We've got so many topics in mind. So our first midweek one we're going to be doing, for example, is we're going to be going over a recap of the top 10 picks of the 2025 NHL draft, just to give some of the listeners a bit of an insight into who these future stars of the league are going to be. But we might have specific episodes based around certain teams, or like you said, history of the league. We may look in the future at trying to get guests onto the show or anything like that, but also equally, we're open all the time to anything you want us to talk about specifically. We will certainly, look into it. I mean, you can reach us both on X and at Instagram at the PBP Podcast. That's the PBP Podcast. So go and give us a follow on there, and then you'll also be kept up to date with everything we're doing in relation to the show and when we're releasing and anything we've got planned. And if you can as well, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you can. Really, really helps us, especially in this early stage of the podcast where, we're looking at pushing this to as many people as possible, and maybe hockey fans as a whole, but maybe people who are just, considering getting into it and want an insight from 2 fans. So yeah, anything that you guys can do to help us would be massively appreciated from us. But yeah, we want to be as inclusive to everything as possible and include you guys along the way.
Absolutely, I second every single bit of that. It's also, we're in those early stages. We're not exactly sure how everything's going to look week by week as we get into the swing of things, but I think we definitely got a solid base that we're going to work from, and it'd be great to go on this experience with everybody and obviously take on any feedback that anybody has. I don't know whether it's worthwhile, Matt, going through obviously the message behind the name of this podcast, the penalty box perspective. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as fans of the NHL or certainly of American sports as a whole, I know you're a big NFL fan as well. I loosely follow Major League Baseball and everything, and I think due to the geographical location of it and sort of how hard it can be to ingest that content because of the timings and everything, it quite often feels like you're very much on the outside looking in. So, we wanted a podcast that kind of demonstrated that point. And who else is better on the outside looking in than someone sat in the penalty box for a 2-minute minor or a 5-minute major? So, we just wanted to try and provide a podcast with that was very much from our outside looking in perspective. And as I said, we're not guys with inside track knowledge on teams, and we're not connected to the to the players or the owners or anything like that. So it's not going to be that kind of podcast. But hopefully, what we want to produce for you guys is something that shows our passion for for the game of hockey as a whole, as well as everything going on in the NHL.
Absolutely. And with that, shall we head straight into the rundown, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll so what we're going to do is we'll work through division by division. So we'll start with the Pacific Division. And as I said, we're just going to have a little run through from last season and see, just recap everything that went down in the 24-25 NHL season. So, where do you want to get us started, Nathaniel?
Yeah. Well, makes sense in my mind to start with the first place team who finished in the Pacific Division, the Vegas Golden Knights, who did post a record of 50, 22 and 10, leading with a score of 110 points with a plus 56 plus minus record, which is pretty good. Obviously, they then became stuck in the playoffs, losing in the second round. But yeah, what do you think about the Vegas season from last year?
Yeah, I think Vegas are a very interesting team. Obviously, they are the second most recent expansion team, and I think the way that they run the team has always been very much focused on winning, which sounds so straightforward, but ever since they've been in the league, they've always made a commitment to trading for big names, trying to get big guys in free agency, and always trying to be as competitive as possible. I mean, in their entirety of their history, they've only ever not made the playoffs one time. They've also won a Stanley Cup in that time. So, it was another competitive season from Vegas. Jack Eichel leading that team, coming close to that 100-point mark of 94, and they've got a large cast of supporting players, the likes of Mark Stone and Thomas Hertel and Shea Theodore Dorofeyev as well. They had a good season in goal as well from Aidan Hill. He just came a little bit unstuck in the playoffs. I know the year they won the cup, they had a carousel of around 4 or 5 goalies, and Hill ended up being, the guy who landed the job full time, and he proved he was good in the regular season. But yeah, I think it just came to them a little bit much in the playoffs, and they weren't able to to maybe go as far as they would have wanted. But that's not going to knock Vegas down at all. They'll be back for it next season again, trying to push again into the playoffs and chase a cup.
Yeah, they've always been a very solid team, which is quite unusual for an expansion team. Generally, they take quite a few years to get up and going, whereas Vegas was up and going from the off. And last year was pretty much the epitome, where they were very good. Obviously, only one team can win at the end of the day, and they didn't quite make it. But yeah, I think last year was very solid for them. If they had probably a better keeper, Bobrovsky or anyone else really, they might have obviously pushed a bit further on in the playoffs when it was crunch time. But I think, I think they had a very solid season. You can't complain at coming first and smashing it. Just let it down a bit later on.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. With that, we'll move to the runners up of the division. Which is the LA Kings, posted a 48, 25 and 9 record, finishing on 105 points for the season. An aging team, maybe, in that core. I don't know. What were your thoughts on the Kings, Nathaniel?
Yeah, again, I think they were kind of surprise candidates last year. Nobody really expected them to do as well as they did. And I think the basis of that was the grit and the determination from their aging players, who obviously posted fairly big and solid numbers. There wasn't really a star player from the Kings last year. They were just sort of a generally good, solid team with no great stuff. They got the names in Anze Kopitar and a bit underdog favourite names like Kevin Fiala, etc. But I think they were just definition of a solid team who had a great season by Darcy Kemper in between the sticks. But essentially, I think it was certainly my impression in the entirety of last year that though they were solid and good and the surprise candidates, they were never going to make it to the Stanley Cup, and that showed true as when they exited in the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're a bit of a strange team because you've got the likes of Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar, who are really in the last couple of years of their careers, and they've both had stellar careers. They're both going to be Hall of Famers, and they've got the likes of Adrian Kempe coming into the prime of his career now. And then you've got Quinton Byfield, who took a massive step last season. 54 points in 81 games, was really, really impressive. Had some real highlight moments last season, and I think certainly looking forward, I think Quinton Byfield is really going to be the focal point of that team. And like you said, they've got a great goalie in Darcy Kemper, who had a great year last year. It'll just be interesting to see how this team's going to look sort of down the line, going into next season and thereon, because that core is going to retire, and they'll just have to see how they progress from there.
Yeah, big question marks for me about how they're going to handle the transition. When do they make the move to move this team further onto the core? They're going to try to do a Vegas and try to plug and play, or are they going to completely reset? But I mean, a bit of a precept to maybe next week's episode, but my concern is that they're a prime regression candidate next year. But obviously we can go into that in a bit more detail at a later time. But
yeah, for sure.
Shall we move on to the third place then, the Edmonton Oilers, who
yes,
big discussions around this team. Kind of a disappointment last year, but they did finish with a 48-29-5 record, finishing third in the division. But yeah, they did make it all the way through to the Stanley Cups. But what did you make of their season?
Yeah, I mean, second time in a row they've got to the Cup final. They've fallen to the Florida Panthers at the final hurdle. They're a really interesting team of the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, even though they finished sort of third in the division, everyone knew they were going to go far. You do see it with quite a few teams where, with it being an 82-game regular season and then the grit and the physical toll of the playoffs that takes on the players, you will sometimes see some teams sort of float through the regular season and make sure that they get to the playoffs, but not busting a gut necessarily to get there. Draisaitl and McDavid, arguably two of the best 5 players in the league, and they're on the same team. Both had 100+ point seasons. I mean, Connor McDavid even with a potential down year of 100 points in 67 games. With Bouchard on the back end as well, and Zach Hyman and Nugent Hopkins just providing them with such high quality depth across the team. The main issue though for the Edmonton Oilers has been their goaltending. It's been an issue for a few years now. Obviously, in the playoffs they had the rotation of Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, and it didn't necessarily seem like they knew which one it was they were going to go for. But yeah, fell at the final hurdle once again, and certainly with Connor McDavid due a new contract in the season coming up. He's a UFA at the end of next season, an unrestricted free agent. There really has to be a commitment, I think, from the Edmonton Oilers that they're just going to have to roll it back and go again, because otherwise these big players, they're maybe going to think they've got a better chance of winning if they go elsewhere. But yeah, any further thoughts on the Oilers for yourself?
I think they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. They're getting so far, but obviously not far enough. That they are a top-heavy team. Like you said, they got the two of the top, probably best 5 players in the league, and as you can tell, they both missed games last year, and that probably did cost them sort of regular season standings. But it's just about that grit when you need it. Facing a team like the Panthers in the Stanley Cup Finals, who are just a complete team. They're not exactly top heavy, whereas the Oilers could be. It's just, well, damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they re-sign McDavid, are they going to be in the same position every year where they can't fill out the back end and obviously pay goaltenders, etc. To that level? Or do they let him walk, build a more complete roster, but then you've lost, obviously, the NHL at the minute. So it's kind of what do they do?
I don't see any world where you can let McDavid walk. That move gets any general manager fired for me. He is the best player in the NHL. You just can't let him go for nothing. Maybe if there is some sort of decision made where he wants to move on, maybe they do a sign and trade where they sign him to a new deal and then trade him. But this is always the problem when you've got two absolute superstars who will take up a large portion of your salary cap. It does diminish what you can then do throughout the rest of the team. Darnell Nurse, another player making big money. I mean, I know that a lot of people do sort of harp on the Oilers for that contract for Nurse. It was a lot of money. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but it's a lot of money for a player who maybe isn't quite worth what he's being paid, maybe slightly overpaid by $1 million or $2 million. But when you're dealing in a hard salary cap where there isn't any flexibility, that extra couple of million really does matter. So it'll be interesting to see. I have no doubt going forward that they'll be there or thereabouts again. It's just they've got to get that cup. They've got to get that cup. There's no way that McDavid can reach the end of his career without one. That would just seem unfathomable.
Rule of averages, though, I can't see them making 3 Stanley Cups on the bounce necessarily. And even if they get there, will they be able to get over their mental angst at getting over the hurdle that last time? But anyway, shall we move on to obviously one of my pet favourite teams, the Calgary Flames? What were your thoughts on their season?
They had a very reasonable season, backstopped mainly by an amazing seain from Dustin Wolf, their rookie goaltender. He was a nominee for the Calder Trophy for the best rookie in the league last season. But they had some good seasons around the board. Uyghur had a decent season on the back end, and they've got Nazem Kadri, they've got Jonathan Huberdeau. I mean, you want to talk about sort of excessive contracts. Jonathan Huberdeau is prime candidate in that region, making over $10 million for a guy who gets you 62 points. I don't know. Matthew Coronato, great season from him last year. He's going to be a really promising part of their future. Maybe someone who's not going to be an absolute superstar in the league, but certainly someone who is going to provide some really good stability in their sort of middle six moving forward. So, yeah, they were good. They were good, but not great. I think you can't simply rely on your goalie to bail you out every night. Obviously, it never hurts having someone who has that capacity, but they're going to have to move forward a little bit, I think. But having Dustin Wolf in there as that kind of anchor for the rest of the team, I think will help them massively.
Yeah, and they did suffer from the loss of several players recently. Obviously know that Oliver Killington was a big loss for them when he went out for the year, and obviously he's since moved on and not really played that well. But I feel like their identity is changing over the past few years, especially when Ryan Husker's come in. So I think, yeah, like you said, they're a very solid team. Could beat anyone on their day, as showed last year, but also could lose to anybody on their day. So I just think it's going to be those, what will it take for them to reach that next step, especially in a stacked division with Vegas and obviously with their rivals, the Oilers. It's going to be very interesting moving forward to see how they go up or down, or whether they just stay the exact same. But I think
I think one of the biggest issues with the Flames for me is they don't have that kind of franchise cornerstone piece. They don't have that absolute A-plus forward or, an absolute sort of elite defenseman. They've got Uyghur. Uyghur's a very good player, but, he's not going to be winning the Norris Trophy anytime soon, in my opinion, anyway. So, yeah, I think they'll be there or thereabouts. I think they're kind of potentially stuck in that middle of the division purgatory at the moment until things move forward.
Definitely. Could either be sneaking into the playoffs or just miss them thereabouts, and I can't say they'd be surprised or shocked by what they do. I think they're aware of where they are at the minute.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on to the 5th place team. The Vancouver Canucks. What a season they had. More off the ice, I think, than on it. Massive issues being faced, constant questions from the media. There was the sort of huge fallout between Elias Pettersson and TJ Miller, JT Miller even, which led to Miller, being traded, and it's just they're a team that really should be pushing on. They've got Quinn Hughes, they've got arguably, one of the best 2 defensemen in the league. Between Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, I don't really think there's anyone better. They re-signed Brock Besser this summer to solidify him there. He had another 50-point season last year. They've just got to figure out what direction it is that they're going, and conversations had with their general manager, recently, where there was a conversation had about whether Quinn Hughes wants to go and play with his brothers in New Jersey, and he kind of said, oh, well, that's certainly an option that we might explore if he wants to go and play with his brothers. It's like, no, you cannot trade your franchise player, just for a cozy family life. That is one way to blow up your franchise immediately, and again is another absolutely sackable offence. Elias Pettersson, he ended up being the one that stayed over JT Miller. Be interesting to see how he sort of bounces back, if he will bounce back. I think that there's an awful lot of talent there. An absolute mercurial talent, can score, can put up points, create opportunities for other people. Athletic, physical. But questions around his attitude, his work ethic, maybe just not quite willing to put in the extra yard. I don't know. But bit of a down year from Thatcher Demko in goal as well. What didn't help that, I don't think, the team's overall performance. But we'll just have to see moving forward. I think them finishing 5th in the division was certainly a disappointment. I think they certainly have higher expectations than that, and you would definitely expect them to be higher next year.
Yeah, it just feels like they need to take a grip of themselves, really. Like they've got the talent, they've got the skills, they've got they've got everything set up in order to cross that line and become that superstar team. But they're kind of like the anti-team to the LA Kings in my eyes, where they've got the talent, they got youth, they got promise, but they're just not matching up to that. And whereas the Kings kind of pull together and perform over, the Canucks just kind of let themselves down. So really, it should be the Canucks in the 2nd place and Kings down in 5th, you'd think, on paper. But it's not exactly how it plays out. Yeah,
absolutely. As we know, it's, if every game was played on paper, it'd be a lot easier to predict. But you just can't predict these things sometimes. And I think really it was the off ice issues, I think, derailed their entire season last year.
Yeah, it killed their momentum and not living up to expectations. It was a really tricky season for the Canucks last year. And though I don't mind them as a team, I think they're quite entertaining to watch. But if what you're becoming is like a WWE fun to watch because of the sideline drama type of stuff, and people aren't going to take you seriously, then that's not a tag you want to hold on to.
No, absolutely not. No, and it's obviously it's such a massive market in Vancouver as well, and they're such a passionate fan base, and all they want is a team that's going to reflect that. And Right now, yeah, they need to figure out what direction they're going to go in, and looking into next season, which I know we're going to touch on in a future episode, but it's going to go one or two ways. They're either going to bounce back or explode, and be interesting to see which direction they go.
Now, the next team, we finished 6th in the Pacific Division, the Anaheim Ducks, another soft favourite, my wife's favourite team, purely because they're called the Ducks. But they posted a 35, 37 and 10 season, obviously minus 42 plus minus. Now, the Ducks are a team who are on the turnaround. Obviously, last year, obviously Troy Terry finishing with 55 points in 77 games, and McTavish as well, finishing 52 points in 76 games. They got a good, solid base last year, sort of a work in progress. Now, obviously, pushing forward to see what happens next year. Obviously, they've made some big signings in the off-season, but I think last year was exactly what everybody expected of the Ducks. They weren't the worst, they weren't the best. They were just sort of simply mediocre.
Yeah, but they're a rebuilding team, and this sort of thing's going to happen. I like the Ducks, even though as a Chicago fan, and I know that they're definitely going to be a team that, when everyone starts hitting their potentials, they're going to be there or thereabouts. So I think I've got a long time to hate the Ducks, but I don't hate them right now. Yeah, they've got so many great young players. I mean, McTavish and Carlson, Gauthier, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they can resolve this kind of McTavish contract issue at the moment. Still due a new deal. Doesn't necessarily seem to be. I don't know what the negotiations are happening there. Whether it's an issue over the term of the deal or the actual dollar value, but they have given a new deal to Lucas Dostal in goal. They've really they're putting the eggs in the Dostal basket. A really, really standout season from him. He had an above 900 save percentage, won 23 games for them last year in 54 starts. And, whilst the Anaheim Ducks are kind of, they finished the season a bit lower in the standings, I think they're going to make a big jump next year. They brought in Chris Kreider from the Rangers, who is a proven goal scorer in the league. They've made a number of other acquisitions and trades, and they were able to get a high draft pick in this year's draft as well. So it's just another piece to add, sort of down the line. And I know we'll probably touch on them when we come to Philly, but decision made to trade Trevor Zegras. Difficult decision, I think, for them to make. I mean, Zegras has been. He's been the franchise face for the last few years, on the cover of the NHL video game, and, very much a player with a lot of personality, but, again, these potential questions over his attitude and things like that. But he's swapped Anaheim for Philly, so it'll be interesting to see how they go on without Zegras, and I think that potentially even further demonstrates how important it is for McTavish to get this new contract and to get that sorted. Otherwise, they could, that's a big piece missing.
Yeah, I just like the fact they got all these youngsters playing, youthful team, and yet they're led by Radko Gudas, who's an absolute monster, absolute tank who doesn't really fit the team identity. And I just like the fact he's leading his team of youngsters out there, and yeah. I think it's good.
Yeah, no, he had you want to talk about the penalty box perspective. Radko Gudas with 86 penalty minutes last year, very much sat on the outside looking in for a large portion of the season. But you're always going to have these guys in your rebuilding teams. You do need a couple of elder statesmen there. You can't necessarily just ice a team of kids, otherwise they're going to get waxed week in, week out, and night in, night out. So yeah, it was good to have a little bit of leadership from him there as well, especially coming off the back of a cup winning year the year before for him. So we'll move on from the Ducks, and the 7th place team coming in around the bottom for the Seattle Kraken, with a 35, 41 and 6 record last season, finishing the year with 76 points. just, yeah. I mean, they had a very promising first year in the league. Obviously, as the league's newest, expansion franchise. Some great young players in there. They've got Shane Wright, they've got Matty Beniers, they've got these pieces moving forward, but just didn't quite happen for them. And they're another team that maybe identity-wise, they need to figure out what direction they're going to go. Do they think that they're in a position where they can start trading assets to try and compete and put themselves over the top into the cup conversation? I don't think so. I don't think the team's necessarily good enough across the board, but equally they're also not looking to blow it up and tank entirely. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they sort of progress and again what direction they go. This is very much a division of up and down teams. So how about you? Your thoughts on the newest team in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, well, goes to the point when we were talking about Vegas earlier, in that teams' first years in a league are often marred by disappointment and low expectations. Now, I won't go so far as to say Seattle are a bad team, but they are just boring. For me, if you load up all the games that have been played on a night time, quite often the Kraken are the team I'd least likely to pick and watch. I think that's because they suffer from no big names. They ain't got the quality players, so therefore they can't really trade them away to develop assets. But neither do they have horrible players where you're going to get an entertaining back and forth game. Now, obviously they finished 7th in their division and they had -18 in terms of their plus-minus. To put that in perspective, obviously the Canucks, who scored 14 points more than them over the year, only had a one better plus-minus than them. So it goes to show that they're in games, but they're just not. They're not getting blown out, and they're not blowing out other teams. They are just, in other words, boring to me. But
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's a real, when you have an expansion team, there's always that initial buzz, isn't there? There was a massive buzz when Vegas entered the league. There was a massive buzz when Seattle entered the league, and we even saw when Arizona relocated to Utah last year. There's a huge buzz, but you really need to harness that excitement. And I think the problem is that after that great first year from Seattle, where they made the playoffs, they've kind of just stumbled their way through the last couple of years, and they have a real danger of falling into an aspect of irrelevance, really, and that's not what the league's going to want for one of their sort of newest expansion teams. That's obviously not what the team are going to want. But I don't know, maybe another year of these, their sort of young corner pieces getting a year older. Maybe they'll come back a bit more renewed next year, but could not agree more. They're extremely vanilla, I think, across the board.
Parents' favourite child, who the younger brother, the more stable, who's going to go get a decent job, but nobody ever talks about them in comparison to their older brother across the border, the Vancouver Canucks, who are just constant drama, and all the attention gets drawn to them. So I think they need to make a big splash or something to sort of catch up to where Vancouver are right now.
Yeah, for sure. Couldn't agree more. I think that summarises it perfectly. Right, yeah. Moving down into the doldrums of the division with the San Jose Sharks. Now, as a Chicago fan, God, they're just going to be neck and neck with the Hawks the whole time. Macklin, Celebrini, Eklund, Smith, they've got the young players. I mean, I could do an entire podcast on the whole Celebrini versus Bedard thing, and but the thing for me with the Sharks was they last season were a horrible team. Finished on 52 points for the year, only won 20 games all season, lost 50, and lost another 12 in overtime and everything. But for me, the media consensus of San Jose Sharks last season was they're a horrible team, but the vibes are great. Everyone loves them, and they've got the young players, and isn't it great that these kids are playing and being given an opportunity? But really, they're rebuilding, so they're going to be there, and they added Michael Misa in the draft this year as well. They're going to be a very, very good team. But it was interesting to see the media dynamic of the San Jose Sharks, despite how awful they've been. To watch at times. They get those flashes every now and then from the young players that gives them a bit more to be excited about.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in the fact that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, they are completely tied with your Blackhawks in the Celebrini versus Bedard, where the trajectory of these franchises, where they're going to be. Are they going to be good enough to keep all of these players come their second contract? Are they going to walk? I think even more so than maybe Bedard in Chicago, because the Blackhawks are a lot prouder of a franchise. But this is the San Jose Celebrinis. Everyone's going to follow him, ride or die, until whatever he does. He's in a great spot there, where I don't think he'll be able to do anything wrong. I mean, he finished he was top scorer of their team last year by a fairly decent margin. But you always just think like he is going to lead that team. I just think that we love them because we know they're rubbish and they're just cheeky. They're friendly, but I think they kind of need to reverse from that position. They could either lean into that, and if they're happy with that, I'm sure they'll live a very nice life. But this is hockey we're talking about here. It's not all cuddles and Netflix, etc. It's all just they got to have some grit to actually win some games.
Yeah,
and they
absolutely,
need to do that sooner
absolutely.
rather than later, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know they've somewhat addressed that this summer, which I know we're going to be reviewing. We're going to be reviewing the transactions and trades and free agency and everything in next week's episode. So we'll be able to talk a bit more on what they've added this year. Okay, I think that wraps us up for the Pacific Division. Moving on into the next one.
Yeah. So again with the Western Conference, the Central Division. Obviously the first place team in this one, the Winnipeg Jets, absolutely smashed it. President Trophy winners. Came in at 56, 22 and 4 at a plus 86 plus minus. They were just a powerhouse. There was no stopping them. They were essentially almost like a guaranteed win every week. But I still found them quite entertaining to watch. Despite the fact they're winning all the time, they're still quite grey and quite neutral. They're not a common enemy of any team, really, I'd say. No,
I think a part of that is due to the viewpoint of Winnipeg as a place. It's an extremely unoffensive location that not too many people necessarily care about. If there are any listeners from Winnipeg, please don't come after me with that. But I mean, the absolute standout star for the Jets last season, Connor Hellebuck in goal. MVP in the league. Can't remember the last time off my head. I think it was maybe Carey Price, who was maybe the last goalie to win that award. But having the best player in the league as voted, be a goalie, really, really shows just how impressive he was during the regular season. But then the playoffs rolled around again, and the constant questions of why can Connor Hellebuck be Hart Trophy MVP player during the regular season, but then blow it up in the playoffs? And that's a question he's going to have to answer. Made 63 starts last season, got 47 wins and only lost 12, with a 925 save percentage. That is crazy numbers, and easily the best goalie in the league for me anyway. Kyle Connor coming just short of a 100-point season. Mark Scheifele, again, another really good season from him. Nikolai Ehlers is going to be a big miss for them, obviously with him having gone to Carolina and in free agency. But 63-point season there, another really good contributory player. But Yeah, I think it was a great season for them. Obviously, President's Trophy winners and everything. It'll just be really interesting to see, if they can run it back. Kyle Connor in the final year of his contract, so he's going to need renewing potentially. And if they get back into the postseason and the playoffs, is Connor Hellebuck going to be able to, overcome his worries?
Yeah, I just think as well. I think there was a lot overblown, more than what the media was pushing about the performance of Hellebuck in the playoffs. He got pulled several times, which obviously impacts his confidence. But the simple fact is, he played 63 games in the regular season. That is a lot of game time, especially for a goalkeeper. People obviously pointed at him when things were going really well, and then pointed at him when things were going really bad. The whole team was solid the entire year, and I simply think they just ran out of steam towards the end. It's so hard to maintain at high level, and in the playoffs anything can happen. It's best of 7, but sort of shock results happen. I wouldn't be surprised if they just continue blustering through next year, just like they did last year.
100%. And again, I think, as you mentioned with Hellebuck, I know that you're going to want to play your franchise goalie as much as possible. But yeah, like you said, 63 starts. That's a lot of game time. That's a lot of minutes. And when it comes to the playoffs, when everyone's a little bit banged up anyway, but just having someone who's already played that much hockey under their belt for the season, albeit played extremely well, maybe they're just going to need a little bit more help for Hellebuck, or just be in a position where they're not having to have him shoulder such a workload, and really be able to to maximise what you're getting out of a really, really elite player. Okay, we'll move into the divisional runners up with the Dallas Stars. Again, posted another 50-win season with 26 losses. Another great season from Dallas. It was really, really interesting to see. Obviously, there was the whole Mikko Rantanen trade saga that ended up with him in Dallas. But it was a great season again across the board. Ottinger in goal, Hintz and Wyatt Johnson and Jason Robertson, Duchesne and Thomas Harley on the back end as well, and Miro Heiskanen as well. No, he had his injury, but again they've just got such a deep team, and they've really, really been able to integrate those young players whilst still maintaining competitive. They haven't had to go into a full tear down rebuild. They've been able to sort of retool as such on the fly and be able to maintain their competitive nature. So I think again they're going to be there or thereabouts. But another really good season from the Stars, and they are everyone's sexy pick year in, year out for the Cup, and I think it's time for them to sort of put up or shut up, really.
Yeah, I just get chaotic energy from the Stars as well. Maybe not behind the scenes, but just more they're always going to be there or thereabouts. But I just think they're losing that cutting edge when it matters the most. And so they made it through to conference finals last year, which is no mean feat. But I just get the impression that they're good but not great. But that might just be my view. Obviously, in a sort of desperate move, they got Rantanen, and arguably they didn't really need him, but he still made an positive impact. But that was still not enough for them to get across the line. But yeah, I think that they're going to be there inside and out. Obviously, we'll touch on it a bit more next week, but I just think their desperation move of getting rid of Peter DeBoer and bringing in a new coach is a sign of just well, we've got the team, have we got the right coach? So I just think I don't think they're going to do as well next year or this year coming up, just based on a coaching change. How is this team going to look?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it maybe feels like a bit of a desperation roll of the dice. And it's going to depend on on the fitness of the players. If Heiskanen can stay fit, and they got 82 games last season out of Duchesne and Robertson and Johnson as well. Harley only missed a couple, Hintz only missed a couple. So if they can keep everyone fit, and they can also keep Rantanen in there, and they're going to be a powerhouse. But like you said, it's all going to hinge down to the coaching change, how that's going to look, how long it's going to take those players to adapt to his system and the way he wants to play. But yeah, they'll certainly be in that competitive space again.
Yeah, that team third behind the Stars, who I think have got a much better upshot next year. The Colorado Avalanche. Obviously, they were only pipped by Dallas by a few points. Just looking at their team with McKinnon, Makar. Obviously, they had Rantanen for the majority of the season, and Devon Toews on the back line. They had a great season in my view, and they were my pick for the cup really. I just think, in summary, that their goalkeeper situation, like many other teams, would just let them down. But I think they had a cracking season last year.
They did, and there's, like you said, there's a few teams that they get let down by their goaltending, and they had Mackenzie Blackwood for he had a temporary stint and played the bulk of it, but Wedgwood chipped in, and Gorgiev chipped in, and Noonan chipped in as well, and they had an awful lot of a lack of consistency, shall we say, but you can't skirt over the fact that they've got Nathan McKinnon, they've got Cale Makar, two of the premium players in the league. Again, Cale Makar, him and Quinn Hughes are essentially going to be battling it out for the Norris Trophy for the next 10 years. And Nathan McKinnon as well, just absolutely dominant again, and 116 points from him, even missing 3 games as well. Makar coming close to 100 points as well, just an absolute monster. They're another team, similarly to the Oilers, who maybe took their foot off the gas a little bit to try and maintain some sort of playoff energy. Maybe why they didn't quite finish, they didn't win the division or come runners up. But they're gonna be back. Core's great. They're in the window where if they're going to want to win a cup, they've got to do it now, or certainly over the next few years, because prospects wise, picks wise, they have pretty much run the cupboards empty. So they've already got one. I'm sure they're going to be hoping they can add another couple, but I would not be surprised if Colorado are a lot of people's pick for the cup again next year.
Yeah. I just stable team. There's very little drama, albeit the Rantanen issues obviously came to a head, but they just dealt with it. They managed it, and they continued on just as they were doing before, just as well. I mean, I know it's weird coming from the Penalty Box Perspective podcast, but I like the team because they're disciplined. The highest people in the box was Miles Wood with 48 minutes last year. Their best players, all their players, are on the ice at the right times. I just think that's a good recipe for success moving forward, really.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, what good is having a franchise elite player if they're, dropping the gloves every 2 minutes, or, getting called for silly penalties and, trippings and hookings and everything like that. Penalties are unavoidable, that they are going to happen, but, having a team that's as disciplined as they are, and they were so good on their own special teams last year, on their own power play and everything like that. You've got, having Makar sort of quarterback that entire thing is, they're just, like you said, they're a very well drilled, very well coached team, and I think as long as their core is together, they're going to be competitive. So, yeah.
Right. Moving on then. to my favourite team, the Minnesota Wild. Well, what a season they had. They started off really, really hot. Kirill Kaprizov going off like a man on a mission. But then they slowly tailed off towards the end. So they did finish fourth, and they did make the playoffs, exiting against Vegas in the first round again. But with a solid 97 points, a 45-30 and 7 record, I think they were a lot of people's surprise candidates earlier on in the season, but were really unlucky with the injury to Kaprizov. He lost half the season to injury, and I think that really just killed them off.
Yeah, 100%. Who knows if they'd had Kaprizov for all 82 games. He scored 56 points in the 41 games he did play, so, definitely would have been at least a 100-point season, in my opinion. Obviously, that's going to be the big talking point moving forward, is what Kaprizov's next deal is going to look like. But, I'm with you. I do like the Minnesota Wild a lot. I love Matt Boldy. I think he's a brilliant player. Marco Rossi as well. I'm glad they've been able to get that contract sort of dispute resolved. Certainly in the interim. Brock Faber as well. Again, just another really, really good young player. They seem to have their goalie, for the future in Gustafsson. He had a great season last year with a 914 save percentage. And last year, it was the Marc-Andre Fleury retirement tour. So it was good for him to be involved there, and he is an absolute legend of the game, and will 100% be going in the Hall of Fame, I think, as soon as he's able. But yeah, great season from Minnesota, and I think definitely one they'll build on, and they'll I think and expect another sort of post-season finish for them, and hopefully just see if they can push through the playoffs a little more. Yeah,
they're a team that's always there or thereabouts. But yeah, I'm happy with how last year went. I'm looking forward to this year coming up for them as well. But yeah, we'll move on again to the St. Louis Blues, who obviously came fifth. Did make the playoffs, squeaked through. Obviously left in the first round again. But I think the Blues season can be summarised in Jim Montgomery effect, really.
Yeah, big time. Massively so. It was, I think, to all the world, it seemed as though when that coaching change was made, that's where he was going to be going. And he's a great coach, really great coach. And they've got some great players there. They were able to bring in, a couple players from Edmonton on the offer sheets, and Dylan Holloway capitalising on that with a great season last year. Jordan Kyrou is again another fantastic goal scorer. He hit 36 goals last season. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Rob Thomas missed a little bit of time, missed a few games, but again, as just being an absolute sort of dynamo in that team. And I think they're very similar to a couple of teams that we've discussed in they do have the potential to sit in that sort of Calgary space of just being in the middle. They're not going to be horrendous. They're not going to be fantastic. They've got Jordan Binnington, who is probably far and away one of my least favourite players in the league. Absolute certified crybaby. But he's he had an alright season. Again, they've got Binnington and Hoffer on that rotation, and seemed to work quite well for them last year. But yeah, it'll be interesting, I suppose, see if they can push their way out of that mediocrity. But it's a really tough division. You look at that division and those top three teams. So Winnipeg, Colorado, and Dallas. It's really going to be hard for any teams to break past those three, really, and especially with Minnesota on that rise as well. So they're going to need a little bit more, I think. But certainly, I think Jim Montgomery having the biggest impact there, I think, for sure.
Yeah. I think they came in lucky with the way that happened, the way Boston fell off and him leaving and going to the Blues. I think this division is going to be the one that's probably going to look the same next year as it does this year. So with the Blues sort of thereabouts, but yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah, we'll move into the into the sixth place team in the division. The now named Utah Mammoth, formerly the Utah Hockey Club, relocated from Arizona. A feel good year there. They didn't have the year that they were expecting or anything, but it was, you know what, it was nice. The Coyotes just hadn't worked. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think through poor ownership. I also think there was just a commitment of them just to never really try to compete. They've moved to Utah, got a great stadium, and the fans seemed really passionate and managed to kind of jump on with the team straight away. And they've got some absolutely fantastic players. They've got, Clayton Keller, they've got Logan Cooley, Dylan Gunther, some absolutely fantastic players there. Vemelka had a good year in goal as well. 90-point season from Clayton Keller, and I think there's going to be a lot of upset fans in Arizona, and I do feel that for them. And they tried really hard to make that work, and you can certainly never question the fans not being committed. But I think the ownership really did run that franchise into the ground, and I think that unfortunately it was untenable for them, and they had to look at relocating. But I think we're starting to get a glimpse of how good this team can look when they care and they show that they want to be competitive and they want to bring in players and really try and push to be as good as they can be. Sixth place this year, I think they're going to look at moving up a bit next season. I think, especially with a lot of these younger players improving, they're a really exciting team. Really exciting. Yeah.
I mean, you say they're really exciting. I just think they are okay. And I think for the next few years, they're probably going to be happy with that. It's that stability that they're looking for. Obviously, even before they left Arizona, they were looking for a new stadium. They weren't getting it. They were playing in half-capacity stadiums, and it just was just not going anywhere. No players wanted to go there. Players wanted out. They've now moved to Utah, and obviously the first year turned out okay. Now obviously they've rebranded, sorted out their proper branding as to the Mammoth. So I think last year was more transitionary. We'll see where they are this year, but ultimately I just see them probably finishing in the same place. As I said before, I think this division is going to look awfully the same this coming year as it did last year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised in that at all. And yeah, absolutely take your point. I think we are certainly seeing a shift in the attitude of the team, I think, since they've relocated. And I think whether they finish higher or not, I think they'll certainly try, which is a lot more than can really be said for when they were in Arizona. So moving on into possibly one of the most disappointing teams last season, the Nashville Predators. Now, this was a team that everybody said that, this is going to be... They won the off-season. They brought in Steven Stamkos. They brought in Brady Shea. They brought in Jonathan Marchessault. They went out and got some really high-quality free agents. You stack that on top of your likes of Ryan O'Reilly and Roman Josi, and they've got UC Saros in goal. And, I was reading certain columnists last season in the pre-season after free agency saying, don't rule out the Predators for the Cup. Could not have gone any worse. I think is fair to say. It just completely blew up. Nothing even close to what they would have expected. Half decent seasons from Philip Forsberg and the likes, but they did not spend all the money on Steven Stamkos for him to be a 53-point player. That is not what he was brought in to do. Same with Jonathan Marchessault, I think. So, Yeah, it's got to be better next season. But yeah, they were a major disappointment. Major disappointment.
Yeah, I just think when they came out at the start of the year and they weren't doing so well, and people were asking questions, are they taking in some time to warm up? But they just seemed to be deflated. Like, they would lose massive games by 4 or 5 goals, and they just look beaten down and dejected, and then they're not having fun. And when you're not gelling and you're not pushing and motivated like that, it's easy just to spiral. I think it's important to see where they go and see if they manage to catch themselves before they drop out too far. But again, next year they're facing the big teams and week in, week out, and they're another year older. They're an older team. How's it going to look? I'm sorry, Nashville fans, but I don't think there's going to be much hope in the next few years, at the very least, for your Predators.
Yeah, I think they could end up, this could end up being a big gamble that might not pay off. The core that we mentioned, your Forsbergs and Marchessaults and O'Reilly, Yossi Stamkos and those, they're all in their 30s. They're not getting any younger, so they're going to have to look at doing something soon. And if not, they're potentially going to end up being a team that needs to tear it down. And I think that's more likely to be the direction.
Shout out to Michael McCarron, though, for being the first player on this list to reach 100 minutes in the penalty box last year. Absolute brute. In pure penalty box perspective fashion. You like sitting and watching like we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving into the bottom of the league, then my Chicago Blackhawks. This is where I have to sit and try and defend them for the next few minutes.
Good luck with
that. A difficult season. They went out. They brought in a lot of veterans. They brought in Teuvo Teravainen. They brought in Tyler Bertuzzi. They brought in the likes of Pat Maroon, and just to try and solidify everything up. They brought in Alec Martinez as well, and I think there was not an intention. I don't think any Chicago fan last season would have thought, they're going to be making the playoffs, or even pushing for a wild card spot. I think what the point was last year was try and get a little bit better now, whilst having the young players improve. A decent year from Bedard, 67 points in 82 games. The kid was a teenager, and he's led the team in scoring in both of his first 2 years. Calder Trophy winner, but it looked poor out the gates. They struggled in the pre-season. They came out in the regular season, and they were on the end of some really poor results. But one of the biggest issues was I think they blew the most third period leads of any team in the league last season. There was an awful lot of games in Chicago where they were leading in the final period, and then they go and concede 3-4 goals in the third and end up getting crushed. But they went out. They made the trade for Spencer Knight with Seth Jones going and picking up a cup in Florida. But at that point in the middle of the season, that was where the tone shift happened. It started becoming less of the veterans' room, and we started seeing more of those young players. Frank Nazar came in, who is just going to be an absolute stud. You've got Connor Bedard there. You've got Alex Vlasic, who is already showing that he could be a really, really good top 4 two-way defenseman in this league. And at the back end of the season, we saw a few more of the younger guys come in. We saw Artem Levshinov come in, the previous season's second overall draft pick. He'd spent most of the year in the AHL. He'd come up and made some appearances. Sam Rinzel came in from college. Oliver Moore came in from college as well. It's going to be a very exciting future for Chicago. They're just going to have to sit through a couple more years of turmoil, I think, beforehand. But you got any thoughts on my Blackhawks?
Yeah, Look, I don't mind the Blackhawks even as a Wild fan. Obviously, got the history, and I think they're almost doing the right thing. Even though the original 6 team, you'd expect them to wanting to be playoffs every year, do or die. But they've seemed to have taken a step back and said, right, look, let's do a reset, and they kind of try to plan it. Do I think they could have made some moves for some bigger names just to help the team along? My concern is that they're throwing a lot on Bedard, expecting him to be a lot like McDavid. It's not too early to say that that's not going to happen, but obviously Bedard is quite small, he's getting pushed around. Obviously Foligno's not going to be around for much longer to protect him. What is his team going to look like in support of Bedard? Because I don't think at this moment in time he's going to be enough to push them all the way forward. So what do the next steps look like? Hopefully the young players which they're blooding through and giving some experience will make that next step. But I think they're a few years away yet from being playoff ready, I think.
They're a good. I would say, looking at making the playoffs maybe 2 seasons from now, 3 seasons from now. But yeah, I mean, even with the fantastic season that Ryan Donato had last season, 31 goals, 31 assists. He's come back for 4 more years. Even with that great season, like you said, there isn't necessarily the quality around Bedard at this particular moment in time for him to really be able to flourish. And whenever they're playing, they're going to be doubling up on him. It's going to reduce his ability to create and score chances. But as soon as they start having some more threatening players who other teams are going to have to be aware of, all of a sudden, Bedard might find himself a bit more available, or if there's people doubling up on him, that's going to leave, Frank Nazar right in front of the net, or, so it'll be interesting. I'm definitely excited for another season of Blackhawks hockey for sure. Are they going to be a playoff team? Probably not, but certainly looking into next season, they're going to have a very young team, and they could end up being, this upcoming season's San Jose Sharks with the positive vibes.
Yeah. Well, I was about to refer back to them Sharks. Really, their aim should be to beat the Sharks. I think, as long as they're ahead of the Sharks, if the Sharks start progressing and the Blackhawks, who have had a few years already, head start at this, that's where things can get a bit sticky for me. But I don't think there's much more to say about the Blackhawks right now. I feel like we could talk about them for the rest of the episode. Shall we move on to the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let's move into the Atlantic Division with the winners of that division, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Just another typical Maple Leafs season. Absolutely outstanding in the regular season. Over 100 points from Mitch Marner. That's going to be a big deficit to fill. Nylander again, great season. Austin Matthews, great season, even with some games missed. Tavares, Matthew Nyes coming in as well, being an absolute, future stud of that team. And they also had some great goaltending last year from Wall and Stolarz as well. So they were fantastic. But again, couldn't get it done in the playoffs. And this these core 4 players that they've now lost one of those. So it's going to be... it's certainly going to be eye-opening to see how they progress from here.
Yeah, the Leafs are definitely the Eastern Conference's version of the Edmonton Oilers. They've got very little excuses. They haven't even got poor goaltending to fall back on as an excuse. They've got star players across the board. It's just, can they get over that hump? And it is difficult when only one team wins it at the end of the year, and they keep facing the Panthers and getting beaten up. So it's just, how do they cross that bridge to stardom? Because really, you can't really point out exactly where their weaknesses lie. So Marner's gone, as you've said. He was their top scorer last year, although it feels like they always expected more of him, even though obviously he was their best player arguably last year. But
Yeah, it's a completely agree, and I don't know if, I mean, Mano has been the butt of criticism for a number of years now, and now he's not there. The fans are either going to have to find someone else to blame, or just get behind the team. But I think they're so starved of success at this point that I think they're getting desperate. But if everyone's fit, Austin Matthews is going to rattle in a bunch of goals, as is William Nylander. It's John Tavares is going to be, he's older now, last few years, but he's still a very reliable sort of depth option. And then they've got the future piece in Nyes, who they're hoping they can step up to an extent in Marner's shoes. So yeah, we'll see what happens there.
I just think, final word on the Leafs, I just know if they make the Stanley Cup this year, I just know Vegas are going to be right there. I just know Mitch is going to score a hattie on them in Game 7 and break their hearts
100%.
again.
100%.
Yeah. Second place, who, again, I think Dark Horse, he really thinks of them as leading the front, or at least I don't, but the Tampa Bay Lightning, again with a great record, north of 100 points on the regular season, left the playoffs in the first round, but when you got a player like Nikita Kucherov, who is just a point machine, that allows just look at their top 4 players all scoring north of 80 points on the season. They were just smashing it.
Yeah, absolutely. They made the big acquisition in Jake Gensel, bringing him in, and Brandon Hagel and Braden Point as well. Just also absolute, elite players. But Nikita Kucherov is just something else. There isn't anything he can't do. You've got Victor Hedman at the back there as well, who again is just an absolute giant. And Andrei Vasilevsky is, I know he comes under some criticism at times, in my opinion, slightly unfairly. I think he's an absolutely outstanding goalie. 921 save percentage last season. Again, another 100+ point season for Tampa. They've had success. They will be looking for more success. They're going to be in that conversation again. I think if Kucherov has a season even close to the one he had last year, that's just going to help them massively. And they're going to be a real threat. But again, another great season for Tampa. They'll be disappointed, I think, that they maybe went out earlier than anticipated. But it was that Florida battle in the start of the playoffs, and you fall to the eventual winners. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I think they're a solid team. They'll be there next year. I think there's not much more to say about the Lightning. To be fair, they're a great team. They're a good team, top to bottom, and that kind of speaks for itself, really. So I'll let you kick us off with the Stanley Cup champions. Yeah, the Stanley Cup champions, who finished third in their division with a record of 47, 31 and 4, with only a plus 29 plus minus to Florida Panthers. I mean, they're the team you kind of love to hate. I did find myself watching them all the time last year, just because their games are gritty, they're edgy, and they're just a fun team to watch. They have lots of players who don't necessarily score lots. They're not a high-scoring team. Sam Reinhart came in with 81 points in 79 games. Off of Barkov, a defensive forward, coming in with 71 points. But they just know how to win games and grind things out, and you can never rule them out of anything. Obviously, backed up by Sergei Bobrovsky between the sticks, they're really just an all-round super team, and you just never rule them out, really.
100%. I mean, for me, the Florida Panthers, they are prime-time playoff hockey. That is what that team is built for. Is it sustainable? I don't know, because that's 2 back-to-back full cup runs for them, 2 cups to show for it. But the likes of Sam Bennett and Kachuk, and when they went and brought in Marchand at the trade deadline, that was a move that I think shocked an awful lot of people. Obviously, they brought in Seth Jones from Chicago as well to provide some stability on their back end. But yeah, they've just got they're such a team. Maybe not with that absolute standout franchise player, but I mean, Tkachuk is still absolutely outstanding. Sasha Barkov, proper Selke caliber forward. I know he's been up there. He's won it. In fact, Florida had 2 finalists for the Selke Trophy for the best defensive forward in the league of both Reinhart and Barkov getting nominated, which I think just goes to show just how hard that team work and how committed their forwards are to doing the defensive side of the game. And they are going to make you work for every single minute that you're out there. And I don't know, a team wins back-to-back Stanley Cups, they start to become the formula for the ways that teams want to build their players. So are we potentially going to see teams looking to build in a way that is gritty and hard to beat and, steel-nosed and everything like that? So, yeah, but another outstanding season for Florida. I know we're going to be touching on it in a future episode, just as a little bit of inside knowledge of whether we think the Florida Panthers can three-peat and if they can hit 3 in a row. I don't know. We'll discuss that at a later date. But yeah, anything else on the Cup champs before we move on?
Yeah, easier said than done for people wanting to emulate the Panthers. It's what I touched on with the Oilers and having McDavid and Draisaitl and not a lot of back end. It's that team effort and grit. And the fact you can add Marchand into a team and he isn't the biggest douchebag on the team is it just goes to show the kind of team that they've built. And I'm all for it.
Big time. So yeah, moving into the 4th place team, the Ottawa Senators, posting a 45-30-7 record at 97 points. Yeah, decent season for the Senators. Not too bad at all. Obviously, they brought in Lena Sulmark in the off season. Another season of Brady Tkachuk, who, by the way, posting 55 points in 72 games with 123 penalty minutes. Very much runs in the family, with both Brady and Matthew at Florida. Their dad, Keith, as well, played exactly the same way. So he'll score on you, he'll create some chances, and he will also, he'll beat you up as well. But a great season from Tim Stutzler as well, and, Drake Batherson, Jake Sanderson, both having some good years. Reasonable season for them. They did not too bad at all. Having someone like Claude Giroux in there as well, experienced guy, really good for the leadership. Good, decent season for Ottawa. I think it'll probably be a bit more of the same for them next year, but again, those slightly younger players taking another step, see what they can do.
Yeah, I think with Ottawa, I think their main aim was to get to the playoffs. Just get in the playoffs, nothing else matters, and I think it showed that they were very happy to get there. It was a tight race close at the end, but I think, that again, they're another mid-place team where you can't really see them getting a lot better or a lot worse, but the fact they made the playoffs, they'll be hoping to do the same next year. But yeah, solid all round.
Good stuff. Moving on then to the Montreal Canadiens, finishing 5th in the division with a 91-point season. Man, Calder Trophy winner in Lane Hudson put up some absolutely, god-tier numbers. 60 assists in his rookie year. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Slavkovsky. They had a great year in goal from Sam Montembeau as well. Who, they're just great. Really good young team. They are going to be, we've talked about the Ducks and the Sharks and Blackhawks and everything. The Montreal Canadiens are going to be the competitors on the other side of the bracket from the other conference. Bringing in Ivan Demidov as well, who I know is going to be a lot of people's favourite for the Calder Trophy next season. They're just a really exciting, young, fast, goal-scoring team, and especially 37 goal season from Cole Caulfield.
Which will only get higher.
Great year for them.
next year. It's going to be that they are the young team. Took a lot of people by surprise last year, thinking that they'd be as general like rebuilding teams with lots of youth, but they seem to have hit the formula right. The young captain in Nick Suzuki as well. They've even gone even younger in that. They don't have that many older players that they seem to rely on. I just think if they keep this momentum up, that they're going to be around in the later end of the playoffs in years to come. But obviously with the Canadiens, you don't want to rule them out, but you don't want to put too much expectations on them either.
Yeah, 100%. But, again, I don't think anyone would put any more expectation on them than the fans themselves. Original Six franchise, massive team, one of the most recognisable teams in hockey. But they are, big things are coming for them, I'm pretty sure. And with that, we come into an absolute gulf of mediocrity. So we're going to start with the 6th place team, the Detroit Red Wings, the Isa plan, in full effect with another missed playoffs for Detroit. Another year of everything being just okay. Good season from Lucas Raymond, who I like. I do like Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin, Moritz Seider. They've got some good young players there, but it's just not working for them. I don't quite know why. With my Chicago hat on, it was really good to see 72 games out of Patrick Kane last season after that hip resurfacing injury. I remember reading a lot about it at the time and seeing how few players have actually ever come back afterwards and played and certainly played to a higher level. But really good to see, to see Kane coming back and getting a few more games under his belt. I'm just not sure what it is. They've got, on paper, they've got some good players, but it's just not working for them. So yeah, I don't know. You any insight on the Red Wings?
I think if we had this conversation a few years ago, I'd have said it's just the town of Detroit, the city of Detroit, who just can't produce any decent sports teams. But with the Lions in the NFL, obviously changing on their side and reaching the playoffs, etc. Now, I think that's going to shoot the Red Wings in the foot, and the fans are going to say, well, if the Lions can win games, why can't the Red Wings? But that being said, they seem to be doing everything right, but they're just not doing enough. So it is a really tricky one. I would say they're the league's most sort of mediocre team, but I think that conversation is going to be safe for the next one.
Oh, yes, it is. 7th place last season, and I apologise if I'm upsetting any Buffalo fans out there, but the Buffalo Sabres, with a 79-point season, I just don't get this team at all. I do not understand them. I don't understand what their plans are. They now have the longest drought from the playoffs of any team in the league, and I don't know how many high draft picks they need, how many prospects they need, how many elite talents they need. But they just have a knack of trading them after a few years. I mean, they've got, Tage Thompson, who's an absolutely fantastic player. You've got Rasmus Dahlin, you've got Alex Tuch, and Zucker had a good year even. They maybe didn't quite get the year they were expecting from Luukkonen in goal. An .887 save percentage, little bit kind of ropey, but yeah, I just don't know. For me, the Sabres are one of the most dysfunctional franchises in sports. They should be doing so much better than they are, but they're not. And I don't know if that's just mismanagement of the assets or, but they've got a really passionate fan base in Buffalo, and you can just see the frustration building with them year after year. Of just it just not happening for them. But yeah, that's my little rant about the Sabres. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, well, I just don't understand how a team can suck at sucking. Like, when they try to win games, they lose them, and when they try to lose games, they win them. They're just nothing. Like, I don't know. It's just soul sucking, and really, like, if it wasn't for the passionate fan base and the iconic location of Buffalo, like, to me, they're prime Coyote territory of let's get this team somewhere else. Let's get them a new owner. Let's do something with them, because they're just not. They're not anything. Like, they're kind of the more frustrating version of the Kraken, really. But you can't blame the Kraken for being new and etc. like that. They just, again, they're right down the bottom of my list of teams that I'd want to watch straight off the bat. Like, I wouldn't really pick them to watch anything. And
100%.
Even if they were playing the Wild, I think I'd probably watch another game, which says something.
Yeah, definitely. And it's exactly like you said. I just don't understand how they can be, because everything about this team says that, they had, Paterka last season. They had, some really good years from some of their players, but just didn't happen. And I don't know where they go from here, but like you said, if it wasn't maybe for their location and their fan base, it could easily be the kind of team that would be that they would consider for a relocation. I'd like to think they may be not looking to do that so regularly, but I think a conversation will certainly start to brew if they continue on this kind of mediocre pathway. But they're an identityless team for me, and I think they really need to try and find one and figure out what they're going to do. I'm ready to be corrected, but I just don't think I will be.
Nordiques await them. But we'll go on to the last place team, and perhaps probably the biggest surprise package, along with Nashville Predators, in the fact that the Boston Bruins came last in their division. The record 33, 39 and 10, posting 76 points. Now, other than David Pastrnak, what is this team? What has happened where they've gone from, like, in the playoffs every year, losing Jim Montgomery and just literally dropping off the face of the earth?
Yeah, absolutely. And they lost Brad Marchand out of that as well. I don't know. Maybe they're thinking that they can, maybe they're thinking that they can sort of retool and try and get themselves back to being competitive. And maybe if there was any franchise that was going to do it, it would be Boston. If there's any franchise that can do it, it would be Boston. Maybe a year or two where they're out on the playoffs, but they're, they find a way of getting themselves back up there. It can't be this bad next season, but they're going to have to make a decision, because they've got a player in David Pastrnak with a lot of value. 43 goals and 63 assists last season. Played all 82 games, 106 points. Just had another monstrous season, but second highest point scorer after that was Morgan Geekie at 57. And that's just not gonna get you anywhere. I think obviously there was a lot of talk once the Swayman contract got sorted, and obviously they lost Ullmark and they decided Swayman was the hand they were going to ride. Only 22 wins in 58 starts last season. .892 save percentage. Probably didn't have the year that they were expecting him to have, without doubt. So I think. Yeah, it's definitely one to keep an eye on and see if the Bruins can try and bounce back from this and move themselves back up the standings and back into relevance. But I don't see Boston trying to tear it all down, because I just don't think that they're that kind of organisation where they're willing to accept the 5 years, 6 years of sitting around the bottom of the standings. I think they're going to want to get back up there quite quickly. Which
goes to show the type of franchise they are. Even when they finish rock bottom of their division, they do win the league in a certain stat, and that is Nikita Zadorov with a crazy amount of time in the box, 145 minutes. Loves a good scrap. Doesn't take any nonsense.
Absolutely.
And probably fed up with the
Absolute
season.
Goon.
top of the league. Gotta hand it to you, Zadorov. I like watching you play, mate.
Okay, moving into our final division then. So moving into the Metro, the Metropolitan Division, with the division winners of the Washington Capitals, which massive season all around. It was the Great Eight chase. Alexander Ovechkin breaking Wayne Gretzky's goal-scoring record, and you really saw the togetherness of the team throughout that season. Ovechkin overcoming a broken leg in a matter of weeks, and it really did seem as though it wasn't on the cards for a while, and then it was, and for people who aren't hockey fans, I don't think it's being acknowledged enough as to just how impressive of a feat this is. Wayne Gretzky has, I mean, for me, he's one of the most dominant athletes of all time in any sport.
Absolutely.
The way he dominated the NHL, and you take away every single goal that Wayne Gretzky ever scored in his career and just counted as assists, he'd still have more points than the next player with goals and assists combined, which is just absolutely outrageous. But it definitely felt like they were all pulling in Ovi's direction last season, and I don't know, maybe moving forward without that beacon to chase for, maybe it's going to they'll peter out a little bit. But they were very entertaining last season, and with an 111 point finish, they were, I really enjoyed watching the chase down for the goals record. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think just based off the goals record alone, I think that got me watching the Capitals a lot last year. They had, I think going into last year, they had the mindset of, well, this was an aging team. They got salary cap issues. They're getting rid of players, and it's sort of like a rebuild. And they had a season like they had last year. Took everyone by surprise. Proper feel-good story. I wasn't too disappointed when they dropped out the second round of the playoffs, but it's just, I think, I'm glad Ovi got that record on a good season and wasn't just a bottom feeder win against the Nashville Predators.
Absolutely. It was good.
It was
good that it all came, that the season in which he broke the record came in a year where they won the division, and it did, it really did have an impact on how their season went as a whole. But 68 points in 60 games for a guy with as many miles on the clock, and I mean, he's just ageless. But speed's never been his game. You might lose a step over a few years when you hit your late 30s, but he's not losing that wrist shot. And be interesting to see if he's how many more years he thinks he has left in the tank.
Yeah, he's going to enjoy his beers before games all too much now, I think. But only one way to tell, and that is time. Yeah. He also said to the second place team, then the conference finalist Carolina Hurricanes, who got a 99 points, just missing that 100-point mark, but a very solid season for the Canes. I mean, you look at the stats for this team, and it's just crazy how well they did. Like, they didn't have a point a game player. They didn't have a goaltender over 900 save percentage. Like, they just seemed to be able to scrape wins, kind of like the Florida Panthers in a sense. But just a very solidly built team, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They ended up with Martin Necas as a part of the Mikko Rantanen trade, and obviously that was a little bit of a distraction in the middle of the season with how that all went down. But Necas came in, had 55 points in 49 games. Another good year from Seth Jarvis. Sebastian Aho is another one of those guys who is going to be jostling with Barkov, for that Selke award. A really, really imperious defensive forward, and just another good year. They're another team who are always a lot of people's outside picks for the for the cup, and for the last 4 or 5 years it's the very much the sexy pick. But we're now starting to reach a stage where it's like we can't just keep picking this team each year and hope they're going to do something. So I think they do need to take a step. Svechnikov, I think they'd probably like a little bit more from him. But having Nature's available for the full season next year, and if they can get another year another year similar from Jarvis and Aho and people, and just expecting maybe a bit more help in goal. Kochekov again maybe didn't necessarily have the year they would have expected, but yeah, again another well disciplined team. Svechnikov leading the team in penalty minutes, but only with 59. So a well disciplined team, and it'll be I think it's a time where they need to decide if they're going to push forward with this or not.
Yeah. Shall we move on to the third place team, the New Jersey Devils? For me, another pet favourite team. I like watching this team play. Always ends up in sort of scrappy games. Obviously came out with a record of 42, 33 and 7 with a plus 20. Obviously ducked out at the first round of the playoffs, but I think what summarised the Devil season is the constant injuries to Jack Hughes. He missed 20 games in the regular season. I know he got 70 points in the 62 games he played. It just felt, though, that his fragility marks up the fragility of this team in general. And they got solid goalkeepers in Markstrom and Allen. They're getting points across the board. Got good mix of experience and youth, but I just think that they're made of glass a little bit.
Absolutely, and I know it took Jack Hughes a few years to get going in the league, but he's really showing now what an impressive player he is. But it's like you said, those injuries caught up with him a little bit last season, and I think him staying healthy is what's going to be really important for them moving forward. Obviously, they've got Luke Hughes there as well. Obviously, naturally, they'll be ending up with Quinn Hughes at some point, since Vancouver just seem intent on giving him away. But yeah, it's they've got that good blend. They've got all the pieces there together. They went out, they got Jacob Markstrom, they got that goalie that they needed. And Jake Allen, put up some half decent numbers as a backup as well. So they've got Jesper Bratt, who can score, a healthy amount of points. They've got all the contributing pieces there. They just need to keep it all together over the course of the season. And I feel really optimistic about the Devils moving forward. But it's all going to come down to health and see how they go from there, I think.
Yeah. They've got prime opportunity. Metro at the minute is fairly weak in comparison to other divisions. They just need to build a solid run, keep strong, and I think they could be in for some good results. But yeah, I think, unless you've got anything further to add.
No, I think we'll move into the fourth place team. Coming up to our last few teams now, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Obviously, with them suffering the tragic loss of Johnny Gaudreau, which still feels surreal to say even now. I know we've just passed a year since that happened, but they had such a massive amount of adversity to go up against and to overcome, and they did match it. They did miss the playoffs just, but a great season from Zach Werenski and Kirill Marchenko again with another good season as well. Johnson and Monahan and Fantilli as well, finding his feet in the league, and he played all 82, which they'll be thrilled with, and 54 points with space for me where he's only going to get better as well. Again, didn't quite get the goaltending. Maybe Merzlikins was okay without being fantastic, but I like the Blue Jackets. Do have a soft spot for them. I know it's not necessarily the biggest market in Ohio, but I think they've got some great players. I'm a massive fan of Zach Werenski. I think he's an absolute beast. And if there's going to be anyone who's going to challenge Makar and Hughes, for that Norris Trophy, for me it's Zach Werenski.
Yeah, agreed. I'll see. I echo the sentiments for Johnny Gaudreau. I talked about at the start how Flames were my original team, and it was mainly when Gaudreau and Monahan were playing together, and when Monahan moved to Columbus to play with Gaudreau, and I was really looking forward to watching this team. And then obviously what happened, and it was just absolutely devastating. So I think the team did play off the back of those emotions and did probably exceed expectations in that regard. But I think they've actually got the skill to back it up. I think this was a flash in the pan for them to see what their potential could be. So, yeah, looking forward, I think they're going to be obviously the team to look out for, really.
Definitely. Moving on then into the fifth place team, and a real surprising season for the New York Rangers. Again, similar to Boston and to Nashville. I don't think anyone saw a drop off from the Rangers quite like this. Good season from Panarin, but that was about it. Adam Fox is always one of those players who, gets talked up in that conversation as being the premium defenseman in the league. 61 points, still had a great year. And Shesterkin, very, decent between the pipes, but they just, I don't know quite how, but it just didn't come together for them last season. And after having the season they had the year prior, where they were, cup favourites and President's Trophy winners, I believe, they just crumbled down, and just was not to be for them.
Yeah, I think each year there are a certain amount of teams that will drop off out of the playoffs, and there's always like 2 or 3 new teams in the playoffs every year, and for them to go up, some teams have to come down. I don't think the Rangers necessarily had like a bad, awful season. They had a +1 on the plus-minus. They pretty much lost as many games as they won. They were just losing games by 1 or 2 goals, and it's just they couldn't grind it out. And it's one of these things where the fluctuations from year to year, they could well be a President's Trophy winner next year, or they could end up in a similar season like they are now. They're just kind of the wrong end of the one goal losses, I think.
Yeah, it was a season of fine margins, I think, for them. I mean, just double check now, 114 points the season prior, where they won the Premier President's Trophy. Sorry, so a 29-point drop off, but not out there necessarily getting hammered night in, night out, but just when it's been a heads or tails, they've come up on the wrong end each time, and but I think they'll bounce back. I think they will have an improved season next year, but a disappointing one for Rangers fans for sure.
Yeah, at least they beat the New York Islanders, who came in 6th place, coming with 82 points over the year. 35 and 12. What a nice symmetrical record that is. But that's probably as interesting as the Islanders get. Again, another team who were relatively boring.
It was interesting enough for them, but it all worked out well for them winning the draft lottery. Which, them having a massive jump, and so we're going to cover this in the midweek episode. But 82-point season, but they leapfrogged a whole bunch of teams to land Matthew Schaefer in the first overall pick of the draft. But like you said, it was a relatively miserable season for the Islanders otherwise. But they've had a great off season, and they'll definitely be improved next year. There's just, I think with the Islanders, it's the way they're coached and their particular style of play. It's a very suffocating style of play. They don't score a lot of goals. They don't necessarily concede a ton of goals. But I mean, no 30-goal scorers last season for the Islanders. Anders Lee chipping in with 29, Bo Horvat with 28. Not big scorers, and that's maybe something that needs to change. They maybe need to open themselves up a bit, and I know their style was more on being hard to beat, but clearly that showed last season that they maybe weren't as hard to beat as they would have thought. Disappointing season for them, I think, but with a good off season, and I think they'll definitely be another team to look out for next year.
Yep. I certainly have nothing more to say on the Islanders. I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings us into our last two teams. Starting off with the second bottom side, the 7th place team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Oh man, where do we start with the Penguins? They are a team in desperate need of a rebuild. And we're going to touch on it, I'm sure. The future of Sidney Crosby, the future of those cornerstone pieces that are going to have their jerseys retired and hung in the rafters of the stadium, but this needs to change. Another 91-point season for Sidney Crosby. Just again, another ageless player who is the only reason why that team stayed even remotely competitive. I know they had a decent season from Raquel and from Brian Rust as well, but they brought in Erik Karlsson, a guy who's scored 100 points in a season as a defenseman, and to come in and chip in with 53 again, it's not terrible, but he's such a defensive liability. And Chris Letang, not the player he was before, and I know he's had his health issues as well. And Evgeny Malkin, only playing 68 games, missed a few as well. But the big problems for me are in goal. Tristan Jarry, I think they were banking on being the guy, and he's just not been the guy for them. And especially look back at those cup teams where they had Marc-Andre Fleury in goal. To see them go from that to Tristan Jarry, I think they're going to be very disappointed. But I think with the Penguins, they're definitely a team in need of a rebuild, and I think definitely looking forward into 25-26. Be really interesting to see who stays and who goes.
I think they are scared of rebuilding just because of the impact that might have on Sidney Crosby. But in not rebuilding, they're also wasting Crosby's career down the pan. It's tricky, isn't it? Because there's definitely a conversation to be had of how many years does Sidney Crosby have left? He's in his late 30s now. Do you owe it to Sidney Crosby to try and run it back one more time? And I know that they've sort of tried this, but it's just not working because Sidney Crosby is, when all is said and done, potentially a Mount Rushmore hockey player. There aren't that many guys who've done what he's done, and he's won the cups to prove it, and he's won all the awards and scored all the points, and he is a true legend of the game. And I have no doubt that again, Malkin and Letang will get their flowers, but just age has caught up with them a bit more than it has with Crosby. And whilst he's able to keep putting up these high numbers, they're just it's just not getting enough from the rest of the team. But I completely agree with your sentiment. I think that there is a fear of letting that core go, and they're almost scared to tear the band-aid off because they don't know what's gonna happen if they do. But I think as long as Crosby's there, I think he will continue to do well. I think he will continue to keep the Penguins relevant. But if you're looking to rebuild and you've got a bunch of aged assets, do you trade Sidney Crosby? Sidney Crosby to the Florida Panthers. Let him have his honeymoon retirement in Florida, winning another Stanley Cup. Let the Penguins get on with the rebuild. I know it probably won't be popular with everybody, but it might actually make both sides happier. But I think
that's a massive shout. I mean, that is going to require some serious salary cap manipulation. For me, I think if he goes anywhere, I think he goes to Colorado. Best friends with Nathan McKinnon. That is the exact kind of player that could be the difference for Colorado between putting them over the top for another cup. You think of a 1-2 punch down the middle of McKinnon and Crosby. There's nothing better in the league for me. But to Florida, that would certainly be interesting, and we've certainly seen stranger things happen.
Yeah, as a Wild, and I would have hoped as a Blackhawks fan, I don't want Crosby and McKinnon in my division on the same team. But
no, absolutely not. But I think it would be entertaining. Evgeny Malkin to the Florida Panthers. That would be an interesting bottom six edition for them, for me. But we'll see. Definitely something we'll be covering in future shows. Right, moving into our last team before we wrap this up. Thank you very much, everyone. So we move to our final team, the Philadelphia Flyers, with a 33, 39 and 10 record, 76 points for the year. Reasonable season. The biggest thing for me was the introduction to the team of Matvei Michkov. There was a whole conversation taking place about Michkov as to whether he would or wouldn't come to the NHL and move over from Russia, which I know was the same conversation that was had in relation to Ivan Demidov with the Chicago Blackhawks, and that's why sometimes these players do fall in their draft standings as they do. But Michkov came in his rookie season, had 63 points in 80 games, and you know they've got an elite player in Konechny there as well. A decent season from Couturier, the captain, as well. Yeah, they're a team that's needing a little bit of a refresh. I think they're gonna be in and around the bottom of the standings, I think, for the next few years. But you know, you watch them accrue some new draft talent, and especially with Paul Martone, they drafted in the most recent draft, big forward, putting him on there with Michkov, who's also a powerful player. They're a few years away, I think, from being right back in contention, but I think they're definitely in the process of refilling the cupboard, so to speak. Yeah,
I think the Tortorella experience was interesting while it lasted. I couldn't see them turning it around there. So when we do cover the off season and looking at projections into the next year, I think definitely they're going to be a non-mover for me. Do I dislike them? Do I not enjoy watching them? No. Do I watch them thinking they're the next big team? No, as well. So I think you've summed it up right in terms of your analysis there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we touched on before when we spoke about the Ducks, they've got the acquisition of Trevor Zegras now. I like Trevor Zegras. Is he a franchise player who's going to completely turn the ship around? Probably not. He's flashy. He's got good character and will provide some very entertaining interviews. But for me, they're just going to need a little bit more than that. So with that in mind, that wraps up our review of the 24-25 season with all 32 teams covered and coming up to the closure of our first episode. So how are you feeling, Nathaniel? You all good?
Yep. I certainly enjoyed that. You can see we enjoy it. It's ran a bit longer than we expected, I think, but I think it's good things to come.
Yeah, for sure. And look, this is a process. Myself and Nathaniel, we're not broadcasting professionals. We don't necessarily have I do have a mild background in music from a past life, so in terms of setting up a microphone, I can do that. But this is our first sort of steps into the podcasting world, and it is going to be a work in progress. So if there is anything that you want from us to that you think is going to improve and benefit the podcast, then please do let us know. We're always open to suggestions. We're always going to be looking for new ways to try and innovate the podcast as well. I just want to, before we do close out, I just want to give a massive shout out to Eden, who's produced all the artwork for us here. She's done an absolutely terrific job in putting that all together. If you do follow us on our Instagram page, she has been tagged in the first post on the page. So she's an incredibly talented tattoo artist, and also turns out incredibly good at podcast artwork as well. So thank you, Eden, for that, and thank you to everyone else for listening and tuning in. And as we said, please pass it on to a friend, and pass the podcast, and let's see the community we can build here. But anything further from you, Nathaniel? No,
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Looking forward to the future, and we'll see you on the upcoming episodes.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll be back with a shorter episode that's going to be covering the top 10 picks of this year's 2025 NHL entry draft. So until then, we will see you then, and take it easy in the meantime.